The whiskey-soaked laughter of cowboys echoed through the dusty streets of Durango, Colorado, but Beatrice Zimmerman heard only mockery in their voices as she bent to pick up the basket of laundry they had deliberately kicked into the dirt for the third time that week. It was August 1878, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the high desert town nestled in the San Juan Mountains. Beatrice had arrived in Durango 3 months earlier with nothing but the clothes on her back and a letter of introduction to Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house on Main Street. At 22 years old, she had fled a life of servitude in St. Louis after the family she worked for had fallen on hard times and could no longer pay her. Durango had promised opportunity, a fresh start in the rapidly growing railroad town. What she found instead was loneliness and cruelty from men who saw a woman alone as fair game for their entertainment. "Look at that, boys," drawled Jack Thornton, a ranch hand who spent more time at the saloon than tending cattle. "Little Beatrice crawling in the dirt where she belongs." His companions roared with laughter, slapping their thighs as Beatrice straightened, her face burning with humiliation. Dirt streaked across the clean white sheets she had spent all morning washing in the creek behind the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson would be furious, and Beatrice would have to rewash everything, losing precious hours she needed for mending and cooking. "Please," she said quietly, her voice barely carrying over their guffaws. "Just leave me be." "Leave you be?" Another cowboy, Tom Mitchell, stepped forward with an exaggerated swagger. "But we are being, sweetheart. We are being very entertaining." He reached out and flicked the brim of her worn bonnet, knocking it askew. Beatrice felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. She had learned in her 3 months here that showing weakness only encouraged these men. She bent again to gather the soiled linens, her fingers trembling with suppressed anger and shame. "That's enough." The voice that cut through the afternoon air was deep, resonant, and carried an authority that made even the rowdiest cowboy pause. Beatrice looked up to see a man unlike any she had encountered in Durango. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun. His chest strained against a leather vest worn over a simple homespun shirt, and his arms were thick with muscle that spoke of years spent in hard, honest labor. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord, and a full beard framed a face weathered by wind and sun. His eyes, she noticed, were a striking pale blue that seemed to see right through the cowboy's bravado. "Who the hell are you?" Jack Thornton demanded, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Caleb Crawford," the mountain man said simply. He moved with surprising grace for such a large man, stepping between Beatrice and the group of cowboys. "And I suggest you gentlemen move along before you embarrass yourselves further." Tom Mitchell laughed, but it sounded forced. "This does not concern you, stranger. We are just having a bit of fun with the help." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Fun." He repeated the word as though tasting something foul. 4 grown men harassing a woman trying to do her work. Where I come from, we call that cowardice. The street had gone quiet. Other townspeople had stopped to watch, drawn by the confrontation. Beatrice saw Mrs. Henderson standing in the doorway of the boarding house, her hand pressed to her chest. Jack Thornton's hand drifted toward the revolver at his hip. "You calling me a coward?" "I am calling all of you cowards," Caleb said evenly. His own hands remained at his sides, but something in his stance suggested he could move with deadly speed if needed. "Now pick up the ladies' laundry, apologize, and get out of my sight." "Like hell I will," Jack spat. What happened next occurred so quickly that Beatrice barely processed it. Jack's hand went for his gun, but Caleb moved like lightning. One massive hand clamped around Jack's wrist before the revolver cleared the holster, and with seemingly effortless strength, Caleb twisted. Jack cried out and dropped to his knees, his arm bent at an angle that had to be painful, but stopped just short of causing real damage. "I said apologize," Caleb repeated, his voice still calm. "I am sorry," Jack gasped. "I'm sorry, Miss Zimmerman." Caleb released him and turned to the other 3 cowboys. "Anyone else?" They backed away, hands raised, mumbling apologies as they dragged Jack to his feet and retreated down the street. The gathered crowd began to disperse, already gossiping about the stranger who had faced down 4 men without breaking a sweat. Beatrice stood frozen, her basket still clutched in her hands. Caleb turned to her, and the hardness in his expression softened. "Are you hurt, miss?" "No," she managed. "Thank you. I do not know what would have happened if you had not intervened." He bent down and began gathering the scattered laundry, carefully shaking dirt from each piece before placing it back in her basket. The sight of this enormous, powerful man handling delicate linens with such care made something catch in Beatrice's throat. "You should not have to thank me for common decency," he said. "Those men should be ashamed." When he handed her the basket, their fingers brushed. Beatrice felt an unexpected warmth spread from that brief contact. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair and beard. He was older than her, perhaps by 10 years, but there was a vitality about him that had nothing to do with age. "I am Beatrice," she said. "Beatrice Zimmerman. Caleb Crawford." He tipped his head in a gesture that was almost a bow. "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Miss Zimmerman, though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Are you new to Durango?" she asked, surprised by her reluctance to see him leave. "Just passing through. I have a claim up in the mountains, about 15 miles north. I come into town every few months for supplies." He gestured toward a pair of pack mules tied to a hitching post nearby. "I was just about to head to the general store when I saw those men bothering you." Mrs. Henderson emerged from the boarding house, her plump face flushed. "Beatrice, are you all right? Bring that laundry inside immediately. We will need to wash it again." She turned to Caleb. "And you, sir, I do not know who you are, but you have my gratitude. Those cowboys have been a menace for months." "Happy to help, madam," Caleb said. As Beatrice started toward the boarding house, Mrs. Henderson caught her arm. "Invite Mr. Crawford to supper," she whispered urgently. "It is the least we can do." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm, but she turned back to where Caleb was unhitching his mules. "Mr. Crawford, would you join us for supper this evening? At the boarding house?" Mrs. Henderson insists. "And truly, we would like to thank you properly." Caleb studied her for a long moment, and Beatrice found herself holding her breath. Finally, he nodded. "That would be very kind. What time?" 6 o'clock, Beatrice said, her heart unaccountably light. "The boarding house on Main Street." "I will be there, Miss Zimmerman." Beatrice spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of nervous energy. She rewashed the soiled linens, scrubbing them with extra vigor, then helped Mrs. Henderson prepare what the older woman insisted must be a special meal. They made fried chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, green beans from the garden, and fresh biscuits. For dessert, Beatrice whipped up an apple pie using the last of the preserved fruit from the previous autumn. "He certainly is a striking man," Mrs. Henderson commented as they worked. "I have heard of Caleb Crawford. They say he came out here 5 years ago after some tragedy back east. Lives alone in the mountains, barely speaks to anyone, keeps to himself." "Why would someone choose such a lonely life?" Beatrice asked, rolling out pie dough. "Everyone has their reasons, dear. Perhaps he will tell you himself." At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock sounded at the door. Beatrice smoothed her best dress, a simple blue cotton frock that Mrs. Henderson had given her, and went to answer. She barely recognized the man standing on the porch. Caleb had cleaned up, though his long hair was still damp and slicked back. He wore a fresh shirt and had trimmed his beard. In his hands, he held a small bouquet of wildflowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to his weathered hands. "For you and Mrs. Henderson," he said, offering the flowers. "I picked them on my way back from the general store. I know they are not much." "They are beautiful," Beatrice said sincerely, taking the bouquet. Columbines, Indian paintbrush, and lupines, the flowers that grew wild in the mountain meadows. "Please, come in." The boarding house dining room held a large table that could seat 12, but tonight it was set for just 3. Mrs. Henderson's other boarders, a merchant and a school teacher, were away on business. The older woman greeted Caleb warmly and ushered everyone to their seats. As they ate, Beatrice found herself studying Caleb when she thought he was not looking. His table manners were impeccable, surprising for a man who lived alone in the wilderness. He ate with quiet appreciation, complimenting each dish sincerely. "This is the finest meal I have had in years," he said. "I had forgotten what real cooking tastes like." "What do you eat up in the mountains?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "Mostly game. Rabbit, deer, elk when I'm fortunate. Fish from the streams. I have a small garden, but the growing season is short at that elevation. Beans and cornbread are staples." He smiled slightly. "It is enough to survive, but it is not this." "You must get lonely," Beatrice said, then immediately regretted the personal nature of the question. But Caleb did not seem offended. "I do," he admitted. That is part of why I chose that life, truth be told. After my wife died, I found it difficult to be around people. The silence of the mountains was easier than the well-meaning condolences of neighbors. "I'm so sorry," Beatrice said softly. "How long ago?" 6 years this November. Fever took her along with our unborn child. I was a different man then, living in Boston, working in my father's shipping business. After I lost Elizabeth, I could not bear to stay. I sold my share of the business to my brother and came west." The pain in his eyes was still raw, despite the passage of time. Beatrice understood that kind of grief, the kind that never fully healed. She reached across the table impulsively and touched his hand. "Thank you for telling me." His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. "Thank you for asking." Mrs. Henderson, with the tact of a woman who had seen much in her 60 years, cleared her throat. "More chicken, Mr. Crawford?" The rest of the meal passed in easier conversation. Caleb told them about life in the mountains, about the wildlife he encountered, and the way the seasons changed at high elevation. He described the view from his cabin, which overlooked a valley carpeted with wildflowers in summer and blanketed with snow in winter. He spoke of the challenges of living alone, of making everything he needed with his own hands, of the satisfaction that came from complete self-reliance. In turn, Beatrice found herself sharing her own story. She told him about growing up in an orphanage in St. Louis, about finding work as a maid at 14, about the dreams she had cherished of someday having a home and family of her own. She spoke of her disappointment in Durango, where she had hoped to find community, but had instead found cruelty from men like Jack Thornton and his friends. They are not all like that," Mrs. Henderson interjected, "but enough of them are that it makes life difficult for a young woman alone." "It should not be that way," Caleb said, his voice hard. "A woman should be able to walk down the street without fear of harassment." After dinner, Caleb helped clear the table despite Mrs. Henderson's protests. He washed dishes while Beatrice dried, their shoulders occasionally brushing in the narrow kitchen. Each touch sent a pleasant warmth through Beatrice's body, a feeling she had never experienced before. When the work was done, Caleb lingered at the door. Night had fallen, and the street outside was dark except for the lights spilling from the saloons. "Miss Zimmerman, might I walk with you tomorrow morning? I need to pick up a few more things from the general store before I head back to the mountains, and I would welcome the company." "I would like that," Beatrice said. "I have marketing to do for Mrs. Henderson. Shall we say 9 o'clock? 9 o'clock, he agreed. "Good night, Miss Zimmerman, Mrs. Henderson." After he left, Mrs. Henderson gave Beatrice a knowing look. "That is a good man," she said. "Lonely, hurting, but good. You could do far worse, dear." "He was just being kind," Beatrice protested, but her heart was beating faster. "Kindness is how it starts," the older woman said wisely. Beatrice barely slept that night. She kept replaying the day's events, from the humiliation in the street to Caleb's intervention, from the warmth in his eyes across the dinner table to the strength in his hands as he had washed dishes beside her. She had known him for less than 12 hours, yet something about him made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since she was a child. The next morning, she dressed with extra care, pinning her blonde hair into a neat bun and choosing her second-best dress, a green calico that brought out the color of her eyes. She was waiting on the porch when Caleb arrived, leading his pack mules. "Good morning," he said, and the smile he gave her made her knees weak. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she managed. "Shall we?" They walked side by side down Main Street. It was early enough that few people were about, and those who were gave them curious looks. Beatrice kept her head high, refusing to show any shame for walking with a man who had defended her honor. At the general store, Mr. Perkins, the proprietor, greeted them warmly. "Mr. Crawford, good to see you. And Miss Zimmerman, what can I do for you today?" Beatrice consulted her list while Caleb browsed the shelves. She ordered flour, sugar, salt, coffee, and various other staples that Mrs. Henderson needed. As Mr. Perkins tallied her purchases, Beatrice noticed Caleb adding items to his own order: fabric, thread, candles, and a book. "I did not take you for a reading man," she commented as they waited for Mr. Perkins to wrap their goods. "Books are precious when you live alone," Caleb said. "I've read the dozen I own so many times I have them memorized. What about you? Do you enjoy reading?" "I love it," Beatrice admitted, "but I have little time and fewer books. Mrs. Henderson has a few volumes, but I have read them all. Caleb picked up the book he had selected, a volume of poetry by Walt Whitman. Would you accept this as a gift? I already own a copy. I cannot, Beatrice protested. It is too much. Please, he said, pressing it into her hands. Think of it as payment for that wonderful supper last night. The book felt heavy with meaning in her hands. Thank you, she said quietly. As they left the store, Beatrice's packages in Caleb's arms and her new book clutched to her chest, they nearly collided with Jack Thornton. The cowboy's face was bruised and his right arm was in a sling. He glared at Caleb but had the sense to step aside without comment. Good morning, Mr. Thornton, Beatrice said sweetly, unable to resist. He muttered something inaudible and hurried away. Caleb chuckled, a low rumble that Beatrice felt more than heard. I suspect he will think twice before bothering you again. I suspect you are right. She paused as they reached the boarding house. When do you return to your cabin? This afternoon. I've already been away from my claim longer than I intended. He set down her packages and turned to face her fully. Miss Zimmerman, I wonder if I might write to you. I could send letters with the supply wagon when it comes through. I would like that very much, Beatrice said, her heart soaring. And please, call me Beatrice. Beatrice, he repeated, as though testing the name. Then you must call me Caleb. When will you come back to Durango? She asked, unable to keep the disappointment from her voice. Usually not until winter, when the snows make travel difficult and I need to stock up for the season. He hesitated, then added, but perhaps I could make an exception, if you would like me to. I would like that, Beatrice said. I would like that very much. He reached out and took her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and deeply romantic. Then I will return in 3 weeks. That should give me time to finish the work I need to do and come back down before the first snows. 3 weeks, Beatrice echoed. It seemed like an eternity. After Caleb left, riding his horse and leading his pack mules up the mountain trail that wound north from Durango, Beatrice threw herself into her work with renewed energy. She cleaned the boarding house from top to bottom, cooked elaborate meals, and spent her evenings reading the book of poetry Caleb had given her by candlelight. Each poem seemed to speak of longing and love, of connection and beauty, and she found herself imagining Caleb's voice reading the words aloud. 2 weeks into her wait, a letter arrived with the supply wagon. Beatrice's hands trembled as she opened it. Dear Beatrice, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to write sooner, but I have been working dawn to dusk to finish my tasks before I return to Durango. I built a new shed for firewood and repaired the chimney, which was damaged in a storm last spring. The work is hard, but satisfying. I think of you often. I find myself wondering what you are doing, whether you are safe, whether those cowboys are leaving you in peace. I imagine you in Mrs. Henderson's kitchen, your sleeves rolled up as you knead bread dough, and the image brings me more joy than I can express. I have been alone for so long, Beatrice. I thought I preferred it that way, that the pain of losing Elizabeth had made me incapable of connecting with another person. But then I met you, and something in me that I thought was dead stirred back to life. You are kind, brave, and beautiful, and I find myself counting the hours until I can see you again. Forgive me if I am too forward. I am out of practice with such things. But I wanted you to know that you have made a profound impression on me, and I hope that we can spend more time together when I return. With warmest regards, Caleb. Beatrice read the letter 3 times, then pressed it to her chest. She immediately sat down to write a reply, her pen flying across the paper. Dear Caleb, your letter brought me such happiness that I cannot find adequate words to express it. Please know that I think of you constantly as well. The 3 weeks until your return seem to stretch endlessly before me. Life here continues much as before, though I am happy to report that the Cowboys have been leaving me alone. Word has spread about what happened, and I suspect they are embarrassed by how easily you handled them. I am grateful for the peace, even as I miss the man who brought it about. Mrs. Henderson sends her regards. She has been teasing me mercilessly about my mountain man, as she calls you, but it is good-natured. She is happy to see me happy, I think. I have been reading the poetry book you gave me. There is one poem, When I Heard at the Close of the Day, that particularly moves me. The poet writes of finding happiness not in recognition or praise, but in being with the one he loves. I find myself understanding those sentiments more and more each day. Thank you for being honest about your feelings. I, too, am out of practice with such things. I've never had a man court me before, never felt this strange, wonderful fluttering in my chest when I think of someone. But I feel it when I think of you, Caleb. I feel it with every heartbeat. Please be safe in your travels and know that I am counting the days until I see you again. Yours, Beatrice. The letter went out with the next supply wagon, and Beatrice resumed her waiting, but now it was a joyful anticipation rather than anxious longing. She knew Caleb felt the same connection she did, and that knowledge sustained her through the remaining days. When the 3 weeks had passed, Beatrice woke before dawn on the appointed day. She dressed in her best outfit, the blue dress she had worn to dinner that first night, and helped Mrs. Henderson prepare breakfast for the boarders. But her mind was elsewhere, her eyes constantly drifting to the window that looked out on the northern road. "He will come," Mrs. Henderson assured her. "That man would ride through a blizzard to see you again." At mid-morning, Beatrice was sweeping the front porch when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. She looked up to see Caleb riding down Main Street, and her heart leaped. He looked magnificent in the autumn sunlight, his broad shoulders squared, his long hair loose around his face. When he saw her, his stern expression transformed into a smile that took her breath away. He dismounted and strode toward her, and before Beatrice quite knew what she was doing, she had dropped the broom and was running to meet him. He caught her in his arms, lifting her off the ground in an embrace that felt like coming home. "I missed you," he murmured into her hair. "I missed you too," she said, breathing in the scent of him, leather and pine and something uniquely Caleb. When he set her down, his hands lingered at her waist. "I got your letter. I've read it every night before sleeping." "And I yours," Beatrice admitted. "Walk with me?" he asked. "I want to show you something." They walked to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land and the mountains rose dramatically in the distance. Caleb pointed to the peaks. "See that mountain, the one with the distinctive double summit? My cabin is just below the tree line on the eastern slope. On clear days, I sit on my porch and look down toward Durango, knowing you are here." "It must be beautiful up there," Beatrice said wistfully. "It is, but it is also lonely." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Beatrice, I know we have only known each other a short time, but I'm a man who believes in acting on his convictions. These past 3 weeks have only confirmed what I felt the moment I saw you standing in that street, refusing to cry despite how those men were treating you. You are strong, kind, and everything I never thought I would find again." Beatrice's pulse raced. "Caleb, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I am falling in love with you. I am saying that the thought of going back up that mountain without you makes me feel emptier than I have felt in years." He took a deep breath. "I am saying that I would like to court you properly, if you will have me. And if in time you come to feel for me what I feel for you, I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife." Tears spilled down Beatrice's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I am already falling in love with you," she said. "I have been since that first day. Yes, Caleb, yes to all of it." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. Then he leaned down and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was Beatrice's first kiss, and it was everything she had ever dreamed a kiss could be. When they finally drew apart, both were smiling. "I will stay in Durango for a few weeks," Caleb said. "I have enough saved to rent a room at the hotel. We can spend time together, let people see that my intentions are honorable." "Mrs. Henderson will be delighted," Beatrice said. "She's been rooting for us since the beginning." The weeks that followed were the happiest of Beatrice's life. Caleb called on her every day, and they spent long hours walking through Durango and the surrounding countryside, talking about everything and nothing. He told her stories of his childhood in Boston, of sailing on his father's ships and learning the merchant trade. She told him about growing up in the orphanage, about the books she had read in secret when she was supposed to be working, about her dreams of a different life. They attended church together on Sundays, sitting side by side in the small wooden building while Reverend Matthews preached. Afterward, they joined Mrs. Henderson and other townspeople for social gatherings. Beatrice noticed how people's attitudes toward her changed now that she had Caleb's protection. The Cowboys who had once harassed her now tipped their hats respectfully. The shopkeepers who had barely acknowledged her now greeted her warmly. Even the town's most respectable matrons began inviting her to their sewing circles. "It should not be this way," Caleb said one afternoon as they walked along the Animas River. "Your worth should not be dependent on having a man to vouch for you." "But it is," Beatrice said pragmatically. "And while I wish the world were different, I am grateful that you are the one vouching for me." He stopped walking and pulled her close. "You are worth 1,000 of those people, Beatrice. You have survived things that would have broken others. You are brave and strong and good, and I am humbled that you would consider spending your life with me." "There is no consideration needed," she said. "I know what I want, and that is you." As October turned to November, the weather began to change. Cold winds swept down from the mountains, and snow dusted the highest peaks. Caleb grew restless, knowing he needed to return to his cabin to prepare for winter. But he was reluctant to leave Beatrice, and she was desperate for him to stay. One evening, as they sat in the boarding house parlor after supper, Caleb took Beatrice's hand. "I need to go back to the mountains soon," he said, "but I do not want to leave you for months, not knowing when I will see you again." "Then do not leave," Beatrice said, though she knew it was not that simple. "Beatrice, come with me." She stared at him. "What?" "Marry me. Now, this week, and come back to the cabin with me. I know it is asking a lot. Life in the mountains is hard, especially in winter. But we would be together, and I would spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you never regretted your decision." "Caleb, Beatrice's mind raced. It was madness, was it not? She had known him for less than 2 months. The cabin was isolated, miles from the nearest neighbor. Winter in the high country could be brutal. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw her future. She saw a man who would protect her, cherish her, treat her with the respect and love she had never known. She saw a life that might be hard but would be filled with joy and purpose. She saw everything she had ever wanted. "Yes," she said, "yes, I will marry you." His whoop of joy brought Mrs. Henderson running from the kitchen. When they told her the news, the older woman burst into tears and pulled them both into a fierce hug. "I knew it," she sobbed. "I knew from the first day. Oh, my dear children, I'm so happy for you." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the church. Beatrice wore a dress that Mrs. Henderson had kept from her own wedding, altered to fit Beatrice's slimmer frame. It was cream-colored silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, and Beatrice felt like a princess wearing it. Caleb wore a new suit he had purchased for the occasion, and he looked so handsome that Beatrice could barely breathe when she saw him waiting at the altar. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony, and Mrs. Henderson stood as witness along with Mr. Perkins from the general store. When Caleb slipped the simple gold band onto Beatrice's finger, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was meant to be. This was home. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Matthews intoned. "You may kiss your bride." Caleb gathered Beatrice into his arms and kissed her deeply, and the small congregation applauded. When they walked back down the aisle as Mr. and Mrs. Crawford, Beatrice felt as though she were floating. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, in the finest room Durango had to offer. It was Beatrice's first time being intimate with a man, and she was nervous, but Caleb was patient and gentle, taking his time to ensure her comfort. He kissed her softly, his hands tender as they explored her body, and when they finally came together, Beatrice felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, Caleb's strong arms wrapped around her. "I love you, Beatrice Crawford," he murmured. "I will love you until my dying breath." "And I love you, Caleb Crawford," she replied, "with all my heart." The next morning, they prepared for the journey to the cabin. Mrs. Henderson had helped Beatrice pack her meager belongings, supplemented with supplies for the winter, preserved foods, extra fabric, books, and various household items. Caleb had arranged for a pack horse to carry everything, along with additional provisions he had purchased. As they prepared to leave, Mrs. Henderson embraced Beatrice one last time. "You will always have a home here if you need it," she said, "but I do not think you will. Take care of each other." "We will," Beatrice promised. "Thank you for everything." The ride into the mountains took most of the day. The trail was steep and winding, climbing through forests of pine and aspen. As they ascended, the air grew thinner and colder, and Beatrice pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders. But the views were spectacular. They could see for miles across the valley, the Animas River a silver thread far below. Caleb pointed out landmarks as they rode, a meadow where elk gathered in the spring, a rock formation that looked like a sleeping giant, a creek where he caught trout. He was clearly proud of his home, and Beatrice felt her excitement growing despite her nervousness about the isolated life ahead. As the sun began to set, they reached a small clearing in the forest, and there, nestled against the mountainside, was Caleb's cabin. It was larger than Beatrice had expected, built from sturdy logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch that looked out over the valley. Smoke curled from the chimney, and as they approached, a door opened to reveal a young man in his early 20s. "About time you got back," the young man called. "I was starting to think you had decided to stay in town for the winter." Then he noticed Beatrice and stopped short. "You brought someone?" Caleb dismounted and helped Beatrice down. "Beatrice, this is Daniel Carver, my nearest neighbor. His claim is about 2 miles east. Daniel, this is my wife, Beatrice." "Wife?" Daniel's jaw dropped. "You got married?" 3 days ago, Caleb said with a grin. "Daniel has been keeping an eye on the place while I was gone. I sent word for him to come by and start a fire so the cabin would be warm when we arrived." "Congratulations," Daniel said, recovering from his shock. He was a lanky young man with sandy hair and a friendly smile. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Crawford. I hope you will be happy here." "Thank you," Beatrice said. "It is lovely." Daniel helped them unload the pack animals, then took his leave, promising to stop by in a few days to check on them. As his footsteps faded into the forest, Beatrice felt a moment of trepidation. It was just her and Caleb now, alone in the wilderness. But Caleb seemed to sense her uncertainty. He took her hand and led her up the porch steps. "Welcome home, Mrs. Crawford." The inside of the cabin was a single large room with a sleeping loft above. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, crackling with the fire Daniel had built. There was a sturdy wooden table with 2 chairs, a counter with a basin for washing, shelves lined with supplies, and a bed covered with what looked like a bearskin. The walls were lined with snowshoes, traps, tools, and other necessities of mountain life. "It is not fancy," Caleb said, watching her face anxiously, "but it is solid and warm. I built it myself 5 years ago." "It is perfect," Beatrice said honestly. It was cozy and well made, and more importantly, it was theirs. "Show me everything." He walked her through the cabin, explaining his systems for storing food, managing water, and keeping warm through the harsh winters. He showed her the root cellar where he kept vegetables and preserved meats, the woodshed he had recently repaired, and the small barn where the animals would shelter. He had clearly put enormous thought and work into creating a sustainable life here. That night, they made love again in the big bed under the bearskin, and Beatrice felt any lingering doubts fade away. This was where she belonged, with this man, in this place. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Beatrice quickly learned the routines of mountain life. She cooked meals on the fireplace, learning to make hearty stews and bread in a Dutch oven. She helped Caleb with the endless tasks required to prepare for winter, splitting and stacking firewood, repairing equipment, hunting game to preserve for the lean months ahead. She was tired every night, her muscles aching from unaccustomed labor, but she had never felt more satisfied. Caleb was patient as she learned, praising her efforts even when things went wrong. When she burned her first attempt at cornbread, he ate it without complaint and assured her she would do better next time. When she struggled to use the washboard for laundry, he showed her a more efficient technique, and always, he made sure she knew how much he appreciated her presence. "I spent 5 years in this cabin alone," he said one evening as they sat before the fire. "I thought I was content. But now that you are here, I realize I was just existing, not living. You have brought joy back into my life, Beatrice." She leaned against his broad chest, feeling safe and loved. "You saved me," she said. "Not just that day in Durango, but in every way. You gave me a purpose, a home, a future. I love you so much, Caleb." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And I love you, my brave, beautiful wife." As November progressed, the first major snowstorm hit. Beatrice woke one morning to find the world outside transformed. Snow had fallen 3 feet deep, blanketing everything in white. The silence was profound. broken only by the crackling of the fire and the wind whistling through the pines. It begins, Caleb said. We will likely be snowed in until spring now. Are you sure you are ready for this? Beatrice looked around the cabin, warm and snug against the storm. She had stocked shelves with food, a pile of books to read, and most importantly, she had Caleb. I am ready, she said. The winter months tested them in ways Beatrice had not anticipated. The isolation was profound, days passing without seeing another human soul. The cold was intense, requiring constant attention to the fire. The work was unending. Melting snow for water, tending the animals, maintaining the cabin, cooking meals. There were days when Beatrice felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on her, when she missed Mrs. Henderson and even the bustle of Durango's streets. But Caleb was always there, steady and strong. On days when she felt low, he would hold her and tell her stories, or read to her from their precious books, or simply sit with her in comfortable silence. He taught her to play cards and checkers, and they had long conversations about everything under the sun. He shared memories of Elizabeth, and rather than feeling jealous, Beatrice appreciated his honesty and the depth of emotion he was capable of feeling. As the winter solstice approached, Caleb surprised her. "Close your eyes," he said one evening after supper. When she opened them, he had laid out gifts on the table. A necklace he had carved from elk antler, intricate and beautiful, a pair of fur-lined gloves he had sewn himself, and a small wooden box with a delicate latch. "Open it," he urged. Inside the box was a packet of flower seeds. "For the garden in spring," Caleb explained. "I ordered them before I came down to Durango. I want you to have your own garden, to grow whatever you like." Beatrice threw her arms around him, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she whispered. "I have something for you too." She'd been working in secret during the hours when he was out checking his trap lines. She presented him with a new shirt she had sewn from the fabric he had purchased, decorated with careful embroidery at the collar. It had taken her weeks, working by firelight, but the look on his face made every pricked finger worthwhile. "It is beautiful," he said. "You are so talented, Beatrice." They celebrated the solstice quietly, grateful to have turned the corner toward longer days. And as January arrived, Beatrice began to suspect something wonderful. Her monthly courses had not come, and she felt different, a strange flutter deep in her belly. When she told Caleb, he picked her up and spun her around, his face radiant with joy. "A baby," he breathed. "Beatrice, we are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. They had not discussed children, had not planned this. "Happy?" He set her down carefully, as though she were made of glass. "I am overjoyed. You have given me so much, Beatrice. A reason to live again, love, hope, and now a child. I could not ask for more." As winter slowly gave way to spring, Caleb became even more protective. He insisted she rest more, took over tasks he felt were too strenuous, and fussed over her like a mother hen. Beatrice found it both touching and occasionally frustrating, but she understood his fear. He had lost one wife and unborn child. The thought of losing another was unbearable to him. "I am not made of porcelain," she told him one day in March as he tried to prevent her from carrying water. "Women have babies all the time. I will be fine." "I know," he said, "but humor me. I need to take care of you." The snow began to melt in April, revealing the meadows bright with the first wildflowers. Beatrice planted her garden, carefully placing each seed according to Caleb's instructions. She envisioned fresh vegetables in the summer and fall, the satisfaction of eating food she had grown with her own hands. Daniel Carver visited as soon as the trails were passable, bringing news from his own cabin and congratulations on the pregnancy. "I will spread the word," he promised. "When your time comes, I will fetch the midwife from Durango." "That is months away yet," Beatrice said. "The baby is not due until September." But it was comforting to know they had a plan. Caleb would not allow her to have the baby alone in the cabin with only him to help, despite Beatrice's assurances that women had been giving birth for millennia. Summer arrived in a riot of color and life. The meadow below the cabin became a carpet of wildflowers just as Caleb had described. Purple lupin, red Indian paintbrush, yellow columbine, and a dozen other varieties Beatrice did not know the names of. Her garden flourished, producing beans, squash, tomatoes, and herbs. She spent her days tending it, preserving food for the coming winter and preparing for the baby. Caleb built a cradle from smooth pine, sanding it for hours until it was soft as silk. He carved animals into the headboard, a bear, an elk, an eagle. Beatrice sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small they were, how fragile. As her belly grew, she found the physical work more challenging, but Caleb was always there to help. He carried the heavy loads, chopped all the wood, and even took over the cooking when bending over the fire became uncomfortable for her. He was attentive to her every need, often anticipating what she wanted before she asked. "You are going to spoil me," she said one evening as he rubbed her swollen feet. "That is the idea," he replied with a smile. "You are carrying our child, Beatrice. You deserve to be spoiled." In August, as her due date approached, Caleb grew increasingly anxious. He rode down to Daniel's claim and made arrangements for the young man to fetch the midwife at the first sign of labor. He prepared the cabin meticulously, ensuring they had everything they might need. He barely let Beatrice out of his sight. "Caleb, you need to calm down," she told him. "You are making me nervous with all your fretting." "I am sorry," he said. "I just cannot stop thinking about Elizabeth, about how quickly everything went wrong. I cannot lose you, Beatrice. I cannot." She took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You will not lose me. I am strong and healthy, and this baby is going to be fine. We are going to be a family, Caleb. You, me, and our child. Believe that." He kissed her then, deep and fierce, and she felt him trying to absorb her confidence. On a warm September morning, Beatrice woke to cramping pains low in her belly. She lay still for a moment, timing them. When they came again, stronger, she knew it was time. "Caleb," she said, touching his shoulder, "the baby is coming." He was awake instantly, his face pale. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. You need to fetch Daniel so he can get the midwife." But even as she spoke, another contraction hit, harder than the first two. Beatrice gasped, gripping Caleb's arm. When it passed, she saw the fear in his eyes. "There is no time," he said. "Daniel's claim is 2 miles away, and Durango is another 2 hours beyond that. The midwife would not arrive for hours. I am not leaving you, Beatrice." "Then you are going to have to deliver this baby yourself," she said, trying to sound calm despite her own rising panic. She had heard stories about childbirth, knew it could be dangerous, but she had Caleb, and that would have to be enough. For the next several hours, Caleb stayed by her side, holding her hand through the contractions, wiping her brow with cool water, murmuring words of encouragement. He had delivered foals and calves, he told her, and while he knew a human birth was different, the principles were the same. His steady presence kept Beatrice grounded, even as the pain intensified. As noon approached, the contractions were coming fast and hard. Beatrice bore down when Caleb told her to, pushed with all her strength, and finally, she felt the baby slip free. For a moment there was silence. Then a lusty wail filled the cabin, and Caleb laughed, tears streaming down his face. "It is a boy," he said. "Beatrice, we have a son." He placed the tiny, squalling infant on Beatrice's chest, and she looked down at the miracle they had created. The baby had a shock of dark hair like his father and strong lungs. His little face was red and scrunched up, and he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Caleb cut the cord and cleaned the baby with gentle, competent hands. Then he wrapped him in one of the blankets Beatrice had made and handed him back to her. The baby rooted at her breast, instinctively seeking nourishment, and Beatrice helped him latch on. As her son nursed, Beatrice looked up at Caleb, who was watching them both with an expression of such love and wonder that it took her breath away. "We did it," she said. "You did it," he corrected. "You were so brave, Beatrice, so strong. I am in awe of you." "What should we name him?" she asked. They had discussed names over the winter, but had not settled on anything definite. Caleb thought for a moment, then said, "What about Samuel? It was my grandfather's name. He was a good man, strong and kind." "Samuel Crawford," Beatrice tried out. "I like it. Samuel it is." By the time Daniel Carver arrived the next day with the midwife in tow, both mother and baby were resting comfortably. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Adams, examined them both and pronounced them healthy. "You did well, Mr. Crawford," she said. "Not many men could have managed what you did." "I had the best possible motivation," Caleb replied, looking at Beatrice and Samuel. As autumn settled over the mountains, the Crawford family began their life together. Samuel was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Beatrice was tired, as all new mothers are, but deeply happy. Watching Caleb with their son, seeing the tenderness in his hands as he changed diapers and the wonder in his eyes as he counted tiny fingers and toes, filled her heart to overflowing. The rhythm of their days changed to accommodate the new life. Caleb took over even more of the household tasks so Beatrice could rest and care for Samuel. He would rock the baby for hours, singing old sea shanties from his Boston childhood in a surprisingly good voice. He built a sling that allowed Beatrice to carry Samuel on her chest while working, keeping him close and content. As winter approached again, they prepared together, a family unit now. Caleb stocked extra firewood and supplies, determined that Beatrice would want for nothing. He had already begun expanding the cabin, adding a second room that would be Samuel's as he grew. On a cold December evening, as snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Beatrice sat in the rocking chair Caleb had made, nursing Samuel. Caleb sat nearby, whittling a wooden toy, and the scene was one of perfect domestic contentment. "Are you happy?" Caleb asked suddenly. Beatrice looked up, surprised by the question. "How can you even ask that? Of course I am happy. I have everything I ever wanted." "You gave up so much to be here," he said. "Society, convenience, other women to talk to. Sometimes I worry that you will regret it, that you will resent me for bringing you to this isolated place." She stood carefully, not wanting to disturb Samuel, and crossed to where Caleb sat. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "That day in Durango, when those cowboys were treating me like dirt, I thought that was all I deserved. I thought I was nothing, worth nothing. And then you came along and showed me differently. You lifted me up, Caleb. You treated me like gold, like I was precious and valuable. You gave me love, respect, and a home. You gave me Samuel. How could I possibly regret any of that?" He pulled her down onto his lap, careful of the baby between them. "You lifted me up too," he said. "I was dead inside. Just going through the motions, you brought me back to life, Beatrice. You are my heart." They sat together as the snow continued to fall, a family bound by love and forged in the wilderness. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and unchanging, witnesses to their happiness. The years that followed were full and good. Samuel grew into a sturdy, cheerful toddler who loved exploring the meadows with his father. Beatrice became pregnant again when he was 2, and this time the birth was easier. Their daughter, Rose, entered the world on a spring morning when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom. She had Beatrice's blonde hair and Caleb's blue eyes, and she was as fierce and independent as her mother. The cabin expanded to accommodate their growing family. Caleb built additional rooms and a proper kitchen. They acquired chickens and a milk cow, creating a small homestead that was increasingly self-sufficient. Daniel Carver remained their closest neighbor and became like family, joining them for holidays and celebrations. Once or twice a year, they would make the trip down to Durango to visit Mrs. Henderson and purchase supplies they could not make themselves. The older woman delighted in her adopted grandchildren, spoiling them with sweets and toys. The town had grown and changed, the railroad bringing more people and commerce, but it still felt like a different world compared to the peaceful isolation of the mountains. On one such trip, when Samuel was 6 and Rose was 4, they encountered Jack Thornton on the street. The cowboy who had once tormented Beatrice was now a middle-aged man with a paunch and thinning hair. He looked at Beatrice, then at Caleb, and quickly crossed to the other side of the street without saying a word. "Coward," Caleb muttered. "Let it go," Beatrice said. "He does not matter anymore. He never really did." She was right. The life they had built in the mountains was so far removed from those early days of humiliation and fear that they seemed like a distant dream. Beatrice had become a strong, capable woman who could shoot a rifle, birth a calf, and survive a mountain winter. She was respected as Caleb's wife, yes, but also in her own right for her skills and strength. As Samuel and Rose grew older, Beatrice and Caleb discussed their education. They taught the children themselves, using the books they owned and whatever materials they could acquire. Beatrice taught reading and writing, history and literature. Caleb taught mathematics and science, drawing on his merchant background. Both parents taught practical skills, hunting, tracking, gardening, animal husbandry, and all the knowledge needed to thrive in the wilderness. Will they be content here? Beatrice wondered one night after the children had gone to bed. Or will they want more? Cities, society, opportunities we cannot give them. We will let them choose, Caleb said. When they are old enough, if they want to leave, we will support them. But we will also teach them that a good life is not measured by money or status, but by love, purpose, and connection to the land. When Samuel was 16 and Rose was 14, another addition arrived. A second son they named Thomas. His birth was a reminder that life continued, that love grew and expanded. Samuel helped his father with the heavy work now, his shoulders beginning to broaden with muscle. Rose was her mother's shadow, learning all the domestic skills that kept the household running. On Samuel's 18th birthday, Caleb took him aside for a serious conversation. "You are a man now," he said. "You can stay here and work the claim with me, or you can go out into the world and find your own path. Whatever you choose, your mother and I will support you." Samuel did not hesitate. "I want to stay," he said. "I want to build my own cabin nearby, find a wife and raise a family here like you and Ma did. This is where I belong." Caleb embraced his son, pride and relief mingling in his chest. When he told Beatrice that night, she cried happy tears. Their son had chosen the life they had built, had found value in the lessons they had taught. Rose, when her time came, made a different choice. She wanted to become a teacher, to go down to Durango and educate the children there. It was hard for Beatrice to let her daughter go, but she understood the desire to make a difference in the world. They helped Rose secure a position at the school and made regular trips to visit her. Thomas, the youngest, was still finding his way, but he showed an aptitude for working with animals that suggested he might become a veterinarian. The world was changing, and opportunities that had not existed when Beatrice and Caleb first met were becoming available. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Caleb surprised Beatrice with a trip. They left the claim in Samuel's capable hands and traveled not to Durango, but to the hot springs in Ouray, a full day's journey away. It was the longest time they had been alone together since Samuel's birth, and it felt like a second honeymoon. As they soaked in the steaming pools, the mountains rising dramatically around them, Caleb took Beatrice's hand. 20 years, he marveled. It feels like yesterday and forever at the same time. "The best 20 years of my life," Beatrice said. "I would not change a single moment. Not even the hard parts? The isolation, the difficult winters, the times when money was tight? Especially not those parts," she said. "They made us who we are. They taught us what we are capable of, and we faced them together." He pulled her close, kissing her with the same passion he had shown on their wedding night. "Here is to 20 more years," he said, "and 20 after that, if we are blessed." "I will take every moment I can get," Beatrice replied. "As long as I have you, I have everything." They returned to the cabin renewed and refreshed, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The years continued to pass, marked by seasons and celebrations, births and deaths, joys and sorrows. Mrs. Henderson passed away when she was 78, and Beatrice grieved deeply for the woman who had been like a mother to her. Daniel Carver married a widow from Durango and brought her up to the mountains, giving Beatrice another woman to talk to in the long winters. Samuel married a sweet young woman named Mary, and they built a cabin a mile from Caleb and Beatrice's place. Soon grandchildren arrived, and the Crawford compound, as they jokingly called it, became a small community unto itself. Family gatherings were loud and chaotic, filled with children running and laughing, exactly the kind of joy Beatrice had dreamed of as a lonely orphan in St. Louis. Rose wrote regularly from Durango, where she had become a beloved teacher and married the town doctor. Thomas went away to study in Denver, but promised to return and set up practice in Durango, where veterinary services were sorely needed. As Caleb and Beatrice entered their 50s, their hair graying and their bodies slowing, they would often sit on the porch together in the evenings, watching the sun set over the valley. The view never got old, and neither did the comfort of the other's presence. "Do you remember that day we met?" Beatrice asked one evening, "when those cowboys were tormenting me?" "Every detail," Caleb said. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever seen, refusing to let them break you." "I remember thinking you were like something out of a storybook," Beatrice said. "This huge, powerful man who came to my rescue. I fell in love with you in that moment, I think, though I did not recognize it yet." Best decision I ever made, stepping in that day, Caleb said. Changed both our lives. You saved me, Beatrice said. In every way a person can be saved. And you saved me right back, Caleb replied. We saved each other. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, hearts entwined. Around them, the mountains stood eternal, and in the cabin behind them, the life they had built together continued. Years later, when Caleb was 68 and Beatrice was 60, they celebrated their golden anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The cabin was packed with family. 3 generations of Crawfords gathered to honor the couple who had started it all. Samuel, now a man in his 40s with children of his own, stood to make a toast. To my parents, he said, his voice thick with emotion, who taught us that true wealth is not measured in gold but in love and family, who showed us that a good life is one lived with purpose and integrity, who proved that the greatest adventures are the ones we share with the people we love. Thank you for everything you have given us. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Beatrice wiped tears from her eyes as Caleb squeezed her hand. She looked around at all the faces, at the legacy they had created, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. That night, after everyone had left or bedded down in various corners of the expanded cabin, Caleb and Beatrice lay in their bed under the same bearskin that had covered them on their wedding night, worn now but still warm. We did all right, did we not? Caleb asked. We did more than all right, Beatrice replied. We built something beautiful, a family, a home, a life filled with love. I love you, Beatrice Crawford, he said, more today than I did 50 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. And I love you, Caleb Crawford, she said, my mountain man, my hero, my heart. They fell asleep in each other's arms, just as they had every night for 50 years. The seasons continued to turn. Winters came and went, each one a little harder on aging bodies, but no less beautiful. Springs brought renewal and wildflowers, summers brought warmth and grandchildren visiting, autumns brought the satisfaction of harvest and preparation for the cycle to begin again. When Caleb was 72, he began to slow down noticeably. His strength, which had seemed inexhaustible, began to fade. Samuel took over more of the physical work, and Caleb transitioned into the role of advisor and teacher, passing on his knowledge to the younger generation. Beatrice remained by his side, as she always had. When his hands became too stiff to whittle, she would massage them until the pain eased. When winter cold bothered his joints, she made sure the fire was always warm. They had taken care of each other for more than 5 decades, and she was not about to stop now. On a spring morning when Caleb was 75, Beatrice woke to find him watching her with a soft smile. Good morning, beautiful, he said, as he had every morning of their marriage. Good morning, handsome, she replied, the same response she had given for 53 years. They rose and went about their day, moving slowly but together. They tended the garden, now smaller than it once was, but still productive. They fed the chickens and collected eggs. They sat on the porch and watched the grandchildren play in the meadow, their laughter carrying on the wind. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Caleb took Beatrice's hand. It has been a good life, he said. The best life, she agreed. I want you to know, he continued, that every single day with you has been a gift. You made me whole again, Beatrice. You gave me everything. And you gave me everything right back, she said, a flutter of worry in her chest. Why are you talking like this? Just want to make sure you know, he said, just in case. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was being silly, but something in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she leaned her head on his broad shoulder, still strong despite the years, and whispered, I know. I have always known. Caleb lived another 5 years, long enough to see Thomas return from Denver and set up his veterinary practice, long enough to meet his newest great-grandchild, long enough to celebrate one more anniversary with Beatrice. When he finally passed, it was peacefully in his sleep, with Beatrice holding his hand. The grief was profound, but so was the gratitude. They had been blessed with more than half a century together, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with a life rich in love and purpose. Beatrice mourned deeply, but she did not regret. How could she regret the greatest love story she could have imagined? She lived another 8 years, surrounded by family in the cabin that Caleb had built with his own hands. She told stories to the great-grandchildren about their great-grandfather, about the day he had stood up to cowboys to defend her honor, about how he had lifted her up when the world tried to keep her down, about how he had treated her like gold when others had treated her like dirt. And when her time came, Beatrice went peacefully, secure in the knowledge that the love she and Caleb had shared continued on in the family they had created. She closed her eyes for the last time with a smile on her face, imagining Caleb waiting for her on the other side, ready to take her hand and lead her home once more. The Crawford family remained in the mountains, generation after generation, stewards of the land and carriers of the legacy. The cabin was preserved and expanded, becoming a family gathering place where stories were told and memories were kept alive. And always, at the heart of those stories, was the tale of Beatrice and Caleb, the orphan girl and the mountain man who had found each other in a dusty Colorado town and built a love that lasted beyond their lifetimes. Their grave markers stood side by side on a hill overlooking the valley, simple stones that read, Caleb Crawford, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. 1806-1881, he lifted her up, and next to it, Beatrice Crawford, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. 1856-1934. She was his gold. The wildflowers grew thick around their graves every spring, columbines and lupins and Indian paintbrush, just as they had when Beatrice first came to the mountains as a young bride. And if you stood there on a summer evening when the sun was setting over the peaks and the wind whispered through the pines, you could almost hear their laughter echoing down through the years, a testament to a love that had conquered loneliness, survived hardship, and created something beautiful that would endure for generations to come.